welcome. I work as an intimacy coach. I work as a connection facilitator, and I've also begun to teach a model of leadership that is based on transparency and wellness by the leader. I met Carolyn Stewart last October when I was visiting Portland, and I went to her dance jam, and I'll let her say a little bit more about the style of dance we were doing called Contact Improvisation. And then I had the joy of seeing her teach at a gathering here in Port Townsend where I live. And I've been studying this form of dance, contact improvisation, for over 10 years, and I've been with all these great teachers. And I saw her get on the dance floor, and she pretty much said, I'm interested in changing the world through this dance form. And I went, you have my attention, lady. Because I'm interested in changing the world through this, the type of teaching I do and the connection work that I do. So already I knew I had something in common with her. Plus she's fun to dance with. And what transpired was a session where she said, how we show up on this dance floor matters. And I'm interested in how we can take it off the dance floor. And how do we show up as ourselves? And how do we show up in a way that takes care of the whole of which we are a part? And she talked about, in some ways, breaking rules in order to bring aliveness and awakeness and that kind of excitement that I associate with the vulnerability that I teach. That edgy exposure where I go, gosh, I may be pushing some edges, but I sure do feel awake in this moment. So after she taught, I kind of shyly went up to her because she's the teacher. So I had that little bit of deference. And I said, I want to know you. And ultimately what I admitted was, I want to interview you. And the thing I want to say, Carolyn, about being with you today is that, and I said this when we were in our practice session, but I'd like to say it for our listenership, is that in your company, I feel like I can relax and I can play. And a lot of times I feel like I've got to look a certain way, and I teach the invitation for people to let that go. But it's because I am very often under the tyranny of that. And I notice the way you teach helps me as a learner and a fellow leader relax. And I know that's where my offering to the world really will come through. And so about you, well, funny enough, I asked Carolyn what she wanted me to say for her intro, for her professional intro. She said, oh, I really don't like that term. And I said, oh, I love that you don't like that term. But by way of just a simple bit of a context, Carolyn has been studying and researching and teaching and being taught by contact improvisation for 35 years. And she says it is her teacher and it continues to be. And that her experience of following this thread has, she calls it, it's been a strict and loving teacher, and it has kept her accountable through many challenges in her life. So with that, Carolyn, I'm so honored to be welcoming you to this webinar and this really verbal jam with me.
Well, thank you, Jessica. It's a little scary being here because I've never done one of these things, but I have so thoroughly loved our conversations. I feel like I've just gotten so many important pieces out of having these conversations with you, and I'm excited to continue it today here with other people. Let's see, contact improvisation, for those that don't know what we're talking about, is a dance form that began in the early 70s, exploring how people could move while in physical contact. And some very high level movers, actually, dancers and martial artists. And they found a lot of stuff they could do while in contact, and it was really exciting. And got to the place where they wanted to share it with the world, found a name, and went through a big debate about whether to put it in, to make it a system, codify it, or to leave it open. And the final decision was to leave it open to exploration. So that's one of the things that attracted me. I just thought, I don't know of anything else in this world that runs this way, that trusts us to improvise. Well, how can you codify something that's improvised anyway? So yeah, I've been in it for 35 years. It's been going on longer than that. I understood in the beginning, I got bitten really hard by this, seeing a duet in a concert. I just knew that I had to do it for the rest of my life, no matter how frustrating were the words that went on in my head. And so it was very frustrating in the beginning. And as I said, this teacher has been very compelling, this teacher of contact improvisation. And yeah, it's been my lifeline. And so what I was going to say was that I heard that there was an operative that went along with the invitation to explore, and that was that we take care of ourselves first. So I became fascinated with that. Is that enough to hold a whole system together? I just was like, it just didn't seem possible. So I got very, very curious about that and just kept wondering about it. And then about 30 years into my investigation, after researching and promoting this idea, I had to laugh one day when I went, oh my God, I've been doing this for 30 years. So I could begin to grasp what it means to care for myself and to question whether I'm in my power. So the dance form for me has been an amazing journey to discover that on the dance floor, there is a paradigm that is mutually nourishing and sustainable. And at this point, that has not been shaken. That just keeps being proved over and over again. So my next frontier is, how do I take the principles that I experience with contact improvisation off the dance floor into my everyday life? And because I need to say to everyone that's new to contact improvisation that because it was not codified, it means that we're all making up our own version of it. So anything I say is the version of my investigation. And there will be people in the contact world that will come up with the opposite of something I say. So I think that's very radical.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's so much you just said. I think just riffing on that last piece, if the leaders are saying different things, it strikes me that the people who are, the languaging is so limited, but following or studying or learning with you, it seems that there's a different responsibility by them. If the leaders are contradicting themselves and kind of going, well, here's my take, but it's not the absolute take. And here's my take, but it's not the absolute take. So what you do is you throw us, anyone who's paying attention and who cares enough to pay attention, into a state of kind of ambiguity, right? And what that is a state of, from my perspective, responsibility. It seems to me that what you're saying with something that's not codified, the dance and the art form that we know as contact improvisation, by saying it's something that we're playing with, that there's not a kind of absolute nature to it, it seems to me that there's a growing up process that you're asking for from the people who are on the dance floor. And I wonder if you can speak to that, about what you're asking from the people who are with you in that place of multiple truths.
Well, my experience of this is that when people can show up and be in relationship with themselves and have access to their yeses and their nos, their interests, then it's possible to meet and discover how we can play and what we can create based on our diversity, which is lacking in the cultural system. And it's safe. If I'm present to my nose and I'm not trying to please my partner to be valuable, then I'm going to be okay. And they're going to have information of how I need to be cared for. Yeah, so it's all of us being willing to step into our unique experience of the moment and share it and play with it. There's no goal. There's just showing up, seeing who we are, how we are, and what's possible.
Which is there's so many things that you said that are so radical. So you're saying if we show up knowing our yeses and our nos, present to our internal experience, able to trust our own internal imperative rather than trying to please someone else. You're talking about no human that walks on the planet right now that I know. I mean, I think that's only a slight exaggeration. The ability to be so anchored inside one's internal truth and stay connected with other people, I think that's really the edge of what we're all learning to do. So you and I have in common that we're fascinated by relationship. You study relationship between moving bodies on the dance floor. I'm a dancer, but my particular path of study is moving bodies off the dance floor. So studying how through relationship we can grow and evolve our consciousness is what I do as an intimacy coach and a leader of leaders, a connection facilitator, and so on. And the things that you're saying, you're in the presence of those things, here's what's possible. I think we need to start as leaders who want to change leadership, asking, what are the building blocks of helping the people who come into my, I'm sitting in my therapy office right now, my coaching office, the people who come into my connection games night, a community event I run every week that's a drop-in night. Anyone can come. I had an 18-year-old last week. You never know who's going to come. People who come to my leadership programs, what are the building blocks so that instead of looking to me for the authority, which is the natural thing to do, I'm the person in the front of the room. I have typically the highest credential, or at least I'm making my credential known. I'm the founder of the thing. How do I have them look to their authority? So people watching this webinar, I'm guessing it's a range of people. It might be folks who are dancers, but my guess is it's folks who are in some way are playing some sort of leadership role in the communities you're in, whether you're a teacher or training to be a teacher, maybe a teacher of yoga or the embodied arts, or like me in mental health. But I'm very curious, especially for the people who are tuning in, this question of what do I do as the sort of designated authority, or what can I do so that the idea of authority starts fading here and the positioning, the living authority in the room starts arising? That to me is the thing that I know you and I are in the inquiry about. I'd love to hear you. I mean, that leading through a relationship, right? There's so many ways that can apply there. I wonder if you can comment on what you found helps.
Well, it's been the puzzle for so very long, and I just keep showing up and trying things and learning from what I like, what worked, what I didn't like. We're so conditioned to follow the leader. As a leader, I don't even really like to think of that term. I'm creating events that I want to participate in. So it's a big experiment. It's one experiment after another. And the deeper I go into this, the more I'm in awe of the amount of conditioning that we come into the room with. So I keep working at how do I frame it to be a horizontal playing field rather than a vertical leader-follower situation.
Yeah.
Even lately, there's lots of things that I've found that I like to do in the dancing. And I would love everybody to know what I like to do in the dancing so they could do it with me. But I have to be very careful of that because I really want them to pick up their experience, do their investigation so that they can own it and feel comfortable and bring something to that mutual playing field instead of just taking on what I'm offering and then perpetuating that. I mean, that's fine if they like it, but I don't know, I'm searching for a way to include us all. Like instead of, I've often thought I would love to call contact gatherings swap meets.
Ooh.
Like we've all been in contact since we got to this planet due to gravity, and we're all using that contact to move around. So we've been in a contact improvisation dance. We have information about our experience if we study our experience, and we can bring that to exploration with another person. I feel at first when I found contact, there were no teachers in Portland, and I felt sorry for myself, and so I had to just, there was one fellow that saw the same concert as I did, and we began to get together trying to figure out what they were doing, and started sharing with our friends and really not knowing what we were doing. And then my long-term dance partner, Patrick, showed up about 4 years into my journey. And we spent every day in the studio exploring. And now I'm really glad that I had that opportunity because it was so thrilling just to get in a room with somebody else and be curious, like, how do you feel? What's going on? What did we just do? Let's do that again. You know, it was just so playful. And we did it with what we had.
Yes.
Yeah.
What I hear was that there was no feeling of he was teaching you, you were conveying skills to him. You were both letting the experimentation teach you. Like you've shared a number of times, contact is my teacher. Well, it seems what you're doing is saying the experience is my teacher. I'm not the teacher. I'm the avid student. I'm the avid learner. I hear you saying, I want other learners with me, or even playmates, not followers. So your lab that you had with Patrick, really, it's like, if we can scale that out, to me, that's really it.
And I also, I mean, I like to think of myself, I am the leader, I am the follower, I am the teacher, I am the student, and to think of every person in the room that way. So that we're all, I mean, I may have 35 years of this thread of experimentation. Somebody may walk in the door not even knowing what it is, but we're meeting on a horizontal, we're meeting. And we have this to figure out together. You know, do they want some of my experience for me to articulate that? Or do they just want to get in a dance and explore moving while in contact?
And determining that feels like magic in the art. Because just as you said earlier, it's just so stunning how much conditioning there is. And I remember in October, I took this, just for play, went with a friend to Portland. We had heard about your jam. And I walked in, and it was your studio, and you were the person I'd heard about. So there's a feeling of kind of, she's got the reputation and she's the teacher and so on. Like, I was walking into that paradigm we're talking about. Now, I tend to walk in with a lot of sense of empowerment because of all the personal work I do, and having learned, I think, the hard way, really, when I don't hold that, how much I can lose ground and sometimes get hurt and so on. Nonetheless, I still walked into that typical paradigm. I mean, one of the things you and I have said as we've been getting ready for this webinar is the frame is everything. I think you called it the frame. Mm-hmm. We could call it the container, we could call it the agreements or the context, but it's the setting of the stage, the parameters or the warm-up that makes possible the exercise. So when I teach my connection games night called Speak Up, we have 5 agreements, and I go through the agreements and so on. But in some ways, it's like we could spend the whole time of the event setting up these new agreements of, okay, I'm inviting your internal authority to step forward and so on. I don't think it gets clunky. We can't just say it. The thing that I've come up with, and I know I've shared this with you, and I'm very curious how the people on the call feel about this and what you all have found, is that when I begin to reveal my experience, so like, I'm frustrated by technology on this call. I'm anticipating not knowing how to take questions at the end of the call. Simultaneous to that, I'm really beginning to drop into connecting with you, Carolyn, and getting into the parts of the exploration that are really juicy to me. But I can get even more transparent. Like, I had a really vulnerable night last night with my partner. I shared a lot of things that I hadn't shared before, and the reverberations of that are still with me, even as I take on this professional role to play with a friend and talk about these important matters that are more kind of, out in the world. But back here in my own personal world, I have a lot going on. And I think that when I, whoo, right? Okay, it's like permission, right? Mm-hmm. And so I found that when I do that, there's this thing I'm straddling. My worry sometimes is like, I'll reveal too much, whatever that means. But what I'm finding is, as I reveal, I actually get closer to the potential of getting to be a participant in the room too. Mm-hmm. And that a certain amount of chaos will ensue between the paradigm of I'm the leader, you're the followers, and we're in an inquiry together. There's a certain amount of chaos that will ensue. So what I'm learning, and this is something that I'm doing with a lot of support, is to be okay with the chaos.
I think it's necessary. I don't usually use the word chaos, but it's very similar to the word awkward. And I like to think there's an awe in awkward, because it means that we're less in pattern if we're feeling awkward. Something new can emerge, and that's what needs to happen. We perpetuate the system that we're in, and so unless we have chaos, unless it's awkward and messy, we're not going to find something that works.
Beautiful.
And we did talk about this transparency in one of our previous conversations, and I was so excited about it because that's my next frontier in the work I do in the studio with people. Is I really want to be more transparent. I think I've invited it, but I haven't modeled it, and I'm really super excited about that. Thank you. Yeah.
You're welcome. Well, I think that my experience is that I can't do transparency by myself. If I'm the only one experimenting with transparency, I look like a lunatic. But lucky for me, I'm standing on the shoulders of people who came before me. Dr. Brené Brown's work, who's operationalized vulnerability as the feelings of emotional exposure and risk give us so much language for all of this, right? The risk taking that I do becomes possible when other people are also taking some of these risks. I'm not alone. Otherwise, it's too high of a risk. So it thrills me. I mean, this is what I saw when I saw you teach. I saw someone who was taking risks. And I'm delighted to think that my risks can expand yours too. I mean, that's really the purpose of this call to me in some ways, is to generate a feeling of we're not the only ones, you and I, but also the people on the call who are probably, I'm guessing, bravely innovating your own styles of leadership. And there's a lot to push against. One of the things I've unfortunately come up against is in that I'm innovating or improvising. Based on things I've learned and things that work, but still certainly not on not teaching from something that is an absolute known or established and so on. That I'm not always sure how much to hold and how much to challenge. Who's in my room, where they may need a little extra assurance that I got you. And I do a lot of that, but I still take these risks of kind of letting there be the awkward, I guess you could call it, the unknown. And it's always a question for me. And sometimes I don't get the balance right. And then I have to think, oh my God, should I just crawl under a rock? You know?
Yeah. I have moments of, oh my God, what am I doing? I have no business doing this. But that's from the cultural system, which sets up leaders as they're going to know, and everybody else is going to learn what they know. And contact improvisation is an infinite form. It's not fixed like that. It's improvisation, so it's continually unfolding. So I get to risk and then debrief with myself, debrief with others, and find out how that risk landed, what the impact of that risk was. Maybe, and we're just constantly learning from our willingness to be vulnerable, all the while taking care of our vulnerability. Yeah,
that's a heroic thing. Our willingness to be vulnerable, all the while taking care of our vulnerability. So, I don't, can you see yourself right now?
In a little box in the top.
Okay, because what's happening at my end as the holder of the webinar, and also because we're Facebook live streaming, is I can't see myself anymore. And it has me feel it has me feel even more exposed because I can't see what you're seeing. Isn't that like, if I can see, I can make sure my hair looks good, and I can make sure the lighting is right, and I make sure I'm looking at the right spot on the camera and so on. I can try to play to what I want you to see. But if I can't see it, I have the opportunity to just be in me. And that actually is a lot of vulnerability. And I think most people don't realize, because of the projection, the story that we put on people who are just sitting in the leadership seat, tall, short, whatever gender, whatever sexual orientation, whatever race, people sitting in the leadership seat. So there's a heavier overlay, however, if we're a racial or a sexual or a gender minority. But it blinds most people to the human. And then what happens, I'm afraid, is that the liabilities that get us into leadership, the woundedness that kind of has helped bring forward our gifts, we run the risk of not tending to our own vulnerability very well, because it can feel isolating and lonely and confusing. And I'm on a bit of a mission to open this door, this window to the actual living experience of someone who's held a lot of leadership roles her whole life, to suggest that there's a human back here, and there's someone who can't do it by herself. There's someone who's paying the toll of the current paradigm, unwilling more and more to pay that toll. So I'm really struck by really the enormity of what you're saying is the task of the leader to hold our own vulnerability. I think it's something that deserves more visibility, that task.
Yeah, and to me, it's an obvious thing to shift, because we have believed that we could put our trust and faith in the leaders, and they're not taking care of us very well. So to share the leadership, to be in this together, to take everyone's voices, to be unified by the diversity that we hold. Each of us has a piece of the puzzle. And if we gather all of that, we're going to make sense out of it.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's something that just is so stunning to me more and more, how everyone is just this unique universe that's processing everything differently from every other universe, and has treasures and gifts to offer the big picture, the puzzle. Yeah, I want to shift things where we're just so excited about what we can put on the table, encouraging each other to put our pieces on the table and see what we have, see what we can make out of it. And it's the same thing in the dance. A lot of contact, I'm thinking now through our conversation here, there's a lot of, I just watched a little video clip this morning, and it can be a very small bandwidth of moves that you see in contact. And I think that is a reflection. If we have this thing that we can do the same, and we can connect on, then we can be connected. But to me, the most thrilling thing is how to be deeply connected and have that connection fuel and encourage and nurture our uniqueness.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Fuel and encourage and nurture our uniqueness. So I almost hear what you're saying is like an invitation. It's like the complete expression of everything there is to learn, like our ability to find and follow this thread to its fullest extent, whatever the thread is, whether we're in whatever learning environment, right? In yours, it's the dance floor and contact improvisation and the relationality of all of that. For me, it's these connection spaces and supporting leaders in the healing arts. But I hear this call to engagement, because the full expression is only possible when the absolute diversity is represented. When all of our different styles of learning and our different awkward, instead of trying to conform, I mean, that intense like oppression of trying to fit in.
Yeah, it's killing us and making us do weird things.
Yeah. What you said.
I try to look for the utter obvious of being here kind of trapped on the earth plane. How does it work? And when I look around, nature works on diversity. The frog doesn't try and be the stone so they can get along. It's just, I thought, we have to reclaim our the natural way of things here. Yeah. Monocropping kills the earth, and
the humans on it,
and to somehow confront the underlying fear that has been, now through the epigenetics, they're saying that we bring the terror, the trauma of 27 generations into our lifetime, to really start to look at that and acknowledge the underlying fear. I mean, sometimes in gatherings, I'll say that because it's true. I'm excited to be with people, but underneath that, I'm afraid. So just to open, that's the transparency again. I think the healing potential of it. We can just gather the information that's there and let it work its magic.
Beautiful. I'm so struck. I feel tender hearing what you just said. I enjoy gathering with people, but underneath that, I'm afraid.
Mm.
And it just feels like a giving permission to be able to acknowledge the struggle that is, some people call it social anxiety.
Mm.
I've found there's no one who's not touched by some version of that.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, no one who's not touched. That underneath that enjoyment, I'm afraid. You had said in one of our calls, this tension between freedom and belonging, something that you really want to give voice to as a dancer. And I think what you said, so acknowledge the underlying fear that it's one thing for us to say we call for diversity, and it's another thing to say our sense of safety is tied to our belonging, and that is deep and wide, and it is right and good and linked to survival. It's real, and there is a working against our survival happening at this point in the ways that we're doing belonging. I found in that I do very deep work in my private coaching that so much of the time I spend with my clients in celebration of the defenses that got them this far. Rather than to say what's wrong with you for having conformed for so long, it's thank God that I took care of myself when conforming was the thing that kept me safe. And then now, is it still the thing, right? That's the thing you talked about at your teaching at the Jam in December is how do we be at choice? Can we make conscious choices? Well, in order to do that, we have to even realize how much our adult social relating is driven by a desire to conform, which is really desire to hide the brilliant, beautiful thing that would attract the awesome partner to us or help us find our muse and our art or whatever it is. But to even begin to have consciousness takes marinating, like thus this webinar, thus all the jams and kind of laboratory style spaces, right? Because there's so much, it seems, yet to be discovered, at least from my perspective, about how to name all the overlays that are like the white noise in our culture. I said to my client this morning that some of her critical voices are the sound of the sky in her inner terrain. She can't hear it. She's beginning to hear it. And as she's beginning to hear it, it's like painful. And then that painful awakening that I think is going to involve and continue to involve tantrums and fits and all sorts of letdowns. And that's where the chaos comes in and explosions. I think that those kind of explosions that are happening for the leaders who are willing to try this innovation, like I want to say to the people on the call, hang in there. Because I think on the other side of all this mess is a liberation, is a waking up, is being able to hear, in fact, the voice that's telling me to hide and to choose otherwise.
Yeah, and it takes coming together and exploring that and trying it on, feeling, considering our agreements with each other. Yeah, the dance has showed me that awareness and that I want to go with awareness and curiosity. And just every time I'm conditioned by the system to be in judgment. And every time I can catch myself or in the or, this or that, right or wrong, if I can track myself, listen to the languaging, catch myself there and shift it to curiosity and awareness.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I think that's enough to take us where we need to go.
Beautiful. I love that you brought in that word curiosity. I want to say a lot more about that. But first I want to say we're at 1:45, believe it or not. And I'd like us to go 5 more minutes because we started a little late because of the technology stuff. And that at 10 to the hour, I'm going to turn off the Facebook Live. And it's going to be just the participants on the webinar. And I'd like to welcome any of you to give not just questions if you don't have questions, but share impact. So to share impact is to say, hearing you two talk, I'm feeling and noticing. Okay, so I want to, for those who are tuning in on the webinar, and the link to tune into the webinar is on my Facebook wall if you're on Facebook Live right now, but want to join the Q&A at the end. For those on the webinar, type in your questions or raise your hand. You can click hand, raise your hand, and I'll bring your voice on and you can ask us or share impact. So that's going to happen in 5 minutes. Okay, so coming back, so the word curiosity, I have thought that if I could give one thing to the world or make one wish, I would wish for everyone the superpower of curiosity. I agree with you that in the presence of curiosity, everything shifts. Because the thing with curiosity is it's naturally not about judgment. It's almost naturally loving. It's just this wonderment, right?
It's a tricky one. People can use curiosity for their agendas. So it's a tricky one to just check ourselves on. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Even healing tools can be wielded as weapons. I think in its purest form. So I study the practice called circling, which you and I have talked about and we've both gravitated towards because it's actually really reminiscent of everything you and I do. Contact improvisation and circling are a very similar practice. And I told you years ago at Dance Camp Northwest, I taught a series of classes that were an integration of the two. Circling is the naming in real time without judgment what is arising in the space in between us, whether that's two people or a group of people. Oh, I notice my fingers and hands tingling as I feel the juiciness of this conversation and also awareness that we're coming to a close. I notice, right? So in circling, we cultivate ideally a pure form of curiosity. Oh, I notice I'm angry. Now I'm not, but I'm just saying, which is different than going, oh, how could you? And so on. And when we can be in the noticer, we actually stay, we have choice, right? We have freedom.
Yeah. That noticing is everything. The longer I do this contact stuff, I think the only thing that really is important is the witness. So that I'm noticing, I'm witnessing my experience, what's arising, and then that gives me choice. Otherwise, I'm just being taken by it.
Right.
Yeah. Sometimes, I mean, I've even had the experience where I can be dancing and I'm not deciding anything. I'm just watching my body make its choices, witnessing what wants to happen. Oh my God, there's so much to talk about. Oh. Anyway, I'm off on another tangent, but
and it's an exciting tangent. I see your face coloring and I see you laugh, and I think witnessing what wants to happen is a delicious languaging because there's such a surrender inside of that. There's a willingness to be led. To me, that is leadership. The willingness to be led by some greater intelligence that is the arising experience.
That's a lovely place for us to end this part. I thank you for that. That's I really like that.
I feel delighted seeing you liking that.
Unless you have something else wonderful to say.
Oh, I'm sure I have plenty. But let's go ahead. So we're going to transition, and I'm going to do my best to see if I can end this Facebook Live broadcast, and then get us into the Q&A. So, This is where I need a tech person. So Carolyn, I want to encourage you while I'm working on this, if there's anything you want to comment on, or share or reflect on, pretty much I'm asking you to stall for me. That's pretty much what I'm doing.
Yeah, I might have a question for the participants. What is your relationship to your own leadership in the context of a leader leading, or I don't know. I just am so excited for people to own their leadership in the moment.
Yeah.
And really invite that. I don't think all leaders necessarily do, but it's exciting to me. Yeah, because it's lonely being a leader. I want people to throw me balls.
Absolutely. Are you now seeing two of me?
Yes.
That's not what I wanted. Okay. Yeah.
Now you're gone.
I feel the same. It can be extraordinarily lonely to be a leader. Can you see me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I feel the same. So it sounds like your question is about people's relationship to leaders. Is that what I'm hearing?
To their own leadership. Yeah. I mean, that's a big subject, but.
So how, when they're not let's call it the designated leader, how when they're not that designated person, how they take their own leadership for themselves.
Yeah.
Well, right now what's happening is because I was doing the Facebook piece, I'm not able to get back to the webinar interface. And so, Lorelei, if you are still on the webinar, could you shoot me a text and let me know? I am still in the webinar. Great. So I think what's going to happen is people who have a question, I'd like you to text it to me. I don't know. This is me improvising. I don't know how to get back to the webinar interface so I can see the question.
Can they put it in the chat box?
I can't see the chat. I don't any longer have.
I've got a chat going on over here.
Oh, hell yeah. Okay. Carolyn to the rescue. So you are welcome to text me 480-993-5562, or in the chat, type your question or reflection, and Carolyn is going to be the navigator for the questions and the reflections. I think it's a really big question, this question of, it's like, I ask myself, because I'm not always the leader. When I walk into spaces and coming into my own leadership, sometimes I'm a little disoriented. Like it takes, I got to figure out what kind of leader do I want to be in that room, in a way, you know?
Yeah, I think I've just practiced having my own relationship to my own experience, that I find sometimes it's hard to go into a more traditional leader follower situation, and I want to know the etiquette. You know, I don't want to interfere with somebody else's frame, so it's hard to know what to share and how much room there is to do something other than what's suggested. And
well, you know what I find interesting as a leader, oftentimes I'll say, I want you to disagree with me.
Yeah,
it actually doesn't mean anything until we get into a really, really safe space. I said this in a talk I gave on Saturday, and to a particular woman who had said it's so hard to disagree with the teacher. But I think there's something in between just saying it, you know?
Let's see, we've got a couple of things in the chat here. Willoughby says, curiosity as childlike awe.
Beautiful.
And then Eduardo says, there's a lot of use of the term leader and leadership. Can you define what it means for you, each of you?
Beautiful.
Do you want to?
Sure. Well, first I want to appreciate, I think you said Willoughby.
Yes.
I love thinking about childlike awe.
Mm-hmm. It's so focused.
It's so focused, and it's got an innocence to it.
Yes.
Like It's,
Yes.
remember Columbo? The kind of like, it's just like a silliness. But in that, you know, I've seen it. I encourage people on this call, if you haven't done contact improv, to go study with Carolyn or other contact improv teachers, or if you have the chance to do circling or go to authentic relating, because I've seen it modeled in those spaces, that curiosity that's actually really almost reverent. It's got a childlike almost reverence. So thank you for that. I define leadership as being me fully and without apology with you.
That's very nice. Yeah. Just, let's see, I would call leadership is flying by the seat of my pants, trying to create a situation I want to be in and seeing how it goes.
Oh my God. I love seeing your face when you say that too. There's a humble kind of being puzzled.
Yeah, it's a big experiment. I love that long ago I was all nervous about something, and this person said, oh, it's just the next experiment.
Beautiful.
You know, it's just...
I feel like I'm still learning as an adult to not hold so much tension all the time. And when you say that,
that's a big project.
Just an exhale. Sherry Garzelli did take me up on my offer to text me. And she said, thank you, Sherry. What I witness in your leadership right now, both of you, is excellent modeling, getting real, getting vulnerable. What I experience in contact improv and in whatever duo is a fear of being able to provide a good enough offer.
Well, come on over and we'll work with that.
What would you say to that? A fear of being able to provide a good enough offer. Oh, she says, I have a really hard time at jams because I don't trust I have anything to offer. As a leader, I think I tend to hide in that role, not get vulnerable because damn, I gotta be a good presenter. Girl, aren't you speaking truth? That fear of not making a good enough offer from any role, from the role of dancer and just participant to the role of leader, I gotta be a good presenter because if not, or I gotta be a good partner because if not, what?
Yeah, and that's how I see the paradigm shift, because everything that you just said there is, there's the what is, and what is your offer, period. You can just be sitting there, and that's an offer. But then you bring in the cultural analysis, judgment, measuring, rating of this thing that is just there. And that's where we get in trouble.
Beautiful.
Right. It comes up a lot. We're programmed to be constantly, am I enough? Am I too much? Am I enough? Am I too much?
Do they like me? Do they not like me? Are they
instead of just savoring, relishing just the simplicity of exactly what's there as it's changing.
We're going to close in just a moment, but I want to reference in the workshop I taught where I combined circling and contact improvisation. I had dancers externalize the kind of fears or at least inner dialogue that Sherry is getting to. So we'd be dancing together and I might say, I worry that I smell. I wonder if I'm keeping you entertained enough. I wonder if you like me. I wonder if you have a girlfriend or a boyfriend. And we could say it, but we weren't responding. We weren't dialoguing. We were just naming it in real time. And that's one of the tools I have found. And I encourage people on this call to play with that as leaders yourselves in whatever position you're in the room. Because I believe in whatever seat we're in, we always have the potential to be a leader, to play with the power of curious naming. As a leader, to be able to say, I notice, I really want to impress you all today. And I realize that keeps me from just being present. Can you imagine? Yeah. Can you imagine the impact? That's for Sherry or any of us. When we name it without apology, that's what I said leadership is to me. Being me without apology with you. When I name it, what I believe is I'm offering a full, not just my own leadership, but the invitation to your leadership too. So unfortunately, we are at the end of our time. I'm going to read Lorelei just shared something. So I just want to name this. And then for anyone who needs to go, thank you so much for being on the hour-long call with us. I think we might linger just for a moment, Carolyn, if you're willing, because Lorelei just sent this question.
And I have several others on the chat here. So it would be nice to be able to read them if people want to stick around.
Okay, great. So for those who want to break the rules and go longer than an hour, we're going to stick around and get to these questions. So this one's for you, Carolyn. Lorelei says, are there specific contexts that you recognize bring up an experience of awe and exploration and not knowing in contact improv more than others? And then she asks me the same question for working in non-dance spaces.
I would say that I try to track my process, and anytime I can catch it in some kind of judgmental chatter, I just switch it to fascination, to awe of exactly what's there. Yeah, because that chatter, that judgmental chatter is a habit that I have been trained to do in this cultural system. It's not who I am. So if I can catch that, it's actually really relaxing and pretty easy to shift it to being fascinated with what, and I like the word fascination. I think it's kind of close to awe, but just to be fascinated with what is actually happening.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
The thing that is such a benefit, I think, to working as a contact improv improviser. I don't want to say leader anymore. I'm looking for other words for you. But it's because it's so embodied. You're so in your body. Like what I would say to her question for working with people is when I'm in play, when I can do playful things, and often the playful things are embodied. When I'm in play, I'm loose. They see me, whoever is in my room sees me cracking up. I love to laugh. What Lorelei says is, for me personally, it is when I'm teaching something or offering something that I don't know as well. I feel more at my vulnerable and all in connected edge. Yes, beautiful. It's a beautiful inquiry. I want to turn to you to read some of the questions in the chat.
Okay, let's see. So there were two from Lorelei. Eduardo, I like the pairing of those definitions and feel freer taking those in, the definitions about leadership. So thank you. I learned many learning from being the leader to just leading myself. And I find it helps to engage new groups through observation, like an anthropologist, so I can respect the current leader and the group's culture to better discover the line of my own self-responsibility to my passion to help. That's
beautiful. Is there a name for that person?
That is Nandi Pathfinder.
Nandi, beautiful. What a lovely, I really am so grateful to hear your reflections, because I think it's so gold. I mean, these are riches for us to externalize what we're finding as we work through these questions. Nandi, thank you for that.
Brent May says, children in play naturally lead follow all the time, sometimes alternating, sometimes both at the same time, which could be co-leading following. Many times there is an orientation of yes, let's, and natural flexibility, rather contrasted to more fixed paradigms of adults. Yeah, definitely more in the flow.
Beautiful. Yes. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. There's a lot to learn. I have 8 nieces and a nephew, And I actually think a lot of my adult genius has come from playing with them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful.
Let's see, there's one more from Willoughby again. Wow. Good enough. Offer totally. Good enough. Offer totally. I was just in a dance workshop where the instructor was teaching from a biomechanical point of view. It was remarkably clear and informative, but the biggest takeaway was the discussion of pre-movement. To extrapolate that out to or emotional self, and how that relates to relaxing or settling into inhabited body.
Beautiful.
Yeah, we're so multidimensional. There's just so many layers that we can tap into to inform all of the others.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, these are topics that deserve like a,
I know.
year-long inquiry. But the piece that Willoughby, is that
Yes.
his name, that your comment, Willoughby, brings up for me is this question of safety. I mean, relaxation follows safety. And there can be a feeling of safety in having a designated leader. And there's also, as we've spoken about at length on this call, this thing that I want to propose is actually keeping us not free, right? That freedom and safety, constant dialectic. And so I think that's I can end with my aspiration. My great prayer is to be guided to create the kind of conditions within which people feel safe enough to get unsafe, to do the unlearning, so we all get free. And to be able to have enough relaxation that we can feel awkward, right? It's finding the up and down, the undulations of those. I'm really grateful for the comments, because they have me feel met by the people listening, that you're with us in it.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that was the last one. Is that right?
Willoughby has one more comment. Yeah.
Woohoo!
Yeah. Okay.
That's great to end on. I can't think of a better final note. I'm so grateful. I feel more at ease in my body after this time with you, Carolyn, and with all of you who tuned in, who I couldn't see, but I sensed. Thank you for saying yes.
Yeah, and I just want to say that I am always open for more discussion, for more inquiry, for more reflection. It's really all I'm interested in, is how we shift this paradigm to one of mutual support and well-being. We can do it, and it takes all of us being in there, being curious about it. So. And through the body is just total fun. So come dance with me.
How would people find you? How would they find you to come dance with you?
I have a website. Well, the ecstaticdance.com has a great listing for all of us, all the dancing in town. And my website is contactgames.wordpress.com.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Find Carolyn in Portland. If you're lucky enough that she comes to your town like she did in my town last December, follow her on the road. You can find me at drjessicatartaro.com. If you live in Port Townsend, you can come to my Connection Games nights on Wednesdays called Speak Up. I look forward to dancing in my non-dance spaces, like being in that kind of laboratory-like dance, even in the spaces. This is one of the gifts that you brought to me, even in the spaces where I'm teaching and sitting and not using my body as much, to get to feel like I'm in a laboratory space, like I'm dancing. That's very exciting to me.
Do you want one more from the chat? We got another
one. Okay, on our way out, but okay.
Okay, this is Michael Callahan. Jessica, whenever you spoke of how it impacted you not being able to see yourself on the call, it reminded me of the challenge I have of trying to forget how I look and suspend judgment of myself and focus on my curiosity and presence. Many times while taking contact improv with you, I worry way too much about not having anything to offer. And the only way I could get through it is to focus on what I want to do and my curiosity.
That's it. Thank you, Michael. That's a sweet friend of mine from Dallas who took all my contact classes when I taught.
Oh, sweet.
A couple years. Very, very sweet. Well, I want to acknowledge that what Sherry brought up, Sherry, my sweet friend in Seattle, connected with Michael in Dallas, this idea of not having something to offer, that there's something that is a wave that travels fast when we give permission and get out loud about what's really happening. And we go, we're all worried about the same thing. So yes. Okay, with that, we will close.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Everyone who's tuning in. Mwah. Bye.
Bye.